I'm Kevin Cirilli. This is America's Vote 2024. And with just days to go before the New Hampshire primary, Nikki Haley is trailing former President Donald Trump by just single digits. Haley is banking that moderate and independent voters will turn out and give her the momentum that she needs to pull off a win. But while Trump has sharpened his attacks against Haley, the former South Carolina governor has secured key endorsements from moderate Republicans. Those moderates include New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu and former Maryland Governor Larry Hogan. But if Haley is unable to pull off a primary win, there is speculation that she could launch an independent bid for the White House. And even she has alluded to such in her CNN town hall earlier, where she noted that 70% of Americans do not want a rematch between Trump and President Biden. Joining us now is former Maryland Governor Larry Hogan. And Governor, I feel like it's back in 2015 when Trump used to call into the morning shows on the phone, but I know you wanted to be here with us, but given the snow situation, we're glad that you could join us on the phone.
Well, Kevin, it's great to be with you. I fully intended to be with you in studio, and I apologize. The snow kind of shut everything down, and we didn't get into D.C.
Hey, Gov, you can't control the weather, but there's some breaking news. Senator Tim Scott is backing Donald Trump. He, of course, is the senator from South Carolina, where Haley was governor. Is this bad news for the Haley campaign?
Well, it's certainly not good news, and I guess it doesn't come as a huge surprise, but it's concerning. Look, I mean, I have a lot of respect for Tim Scott, and I was glad he was out there running. He obviously didn't believe that Donald Trump should be president, which is why he ran against him. But this is, certainly everybody seems to be, getting in line because, Trump, he's pretty good at cajoling and threatening, and he's got a lot of power to exercise, and so a lot of folks in the Senate and the House are just kind of falling in behind Trump, even though a lot of them didn't think he was the right guy to be our nominee.
So, Governor, would you ever see a world where you back Trump for the nomination?
No, I don't see that at all. I mean, I just don't believe Trump ought to be anywhere near the White House. And I've said, repeatedly that I would not consider voting for him. I'm not going to vote for Joe Biden either, which is why I'm so, really focused on hoping that we can get I think Nikki Haley's the only one with any shot to stop Donald Trump. I think he's our weakest possible nominee. We've had nothing but, the past three elections, we've done nothing but lose. We lost the White House, the Senate, we lost the governor's races and state legislative bodies. I think we've got to move forward rather than continuing to look backward. And I think we've got to have a bigger tent party that appeals to more people because we've lost the popular vote in 7 out of the last 8 presidential elections, and Trump's going to lose it again.
Well, focusing specifically on Nikki Haley, she polls incredibly well with independents. She polls well with moderates. If she doesn't win the New Hampshire primary and loses South Carolina, do you think that you'd be able to recruit her to run in a no-labels unity ticket? Would she be someone on that list?
No, look, I'm still, I don't want to speculate because I'm hoping that she will win New Hampshire, which could give her some, some real momentum heading back to her home state of South Carolina. I think she's already said she would not be interested in that. I also think there's some sore loser laws to contend with. If somebody runs in a Republican primary that they might have difficulty running as an independent, but it's not something she wants, and I'm not sure it's good for her because she's likely to she's young, she's got a future, and she may, if she doesn't win this time, she may be a potential candidate in 2028.
But do you think that still ultimately then there still might be another Republican, yourself or another, who ultimately does choose that no labels unity ticket path?
Well, look, I think there are about 70% of the people, and Nikki Haley was quoting me in the town hall last night. I've been saying that for a long time. 70% of the people in America do not want Donald Trump or Joe Biden to be president. We now have about 43% of the voters in America are independent, which is far more than there are Democrats or Republicans. They're both down in the 20s somewhere. And so, about 59% said they would consider an alternative or, a third option. So no labels, again, we're still trying to, come up with a better candidate in the Republican primary process. I think Democrats would be better off putting up someone other than Joe Biden. But if it's those two, I think there is a likelihood no labels will get access to the ballot, and they're talking about a unity ticket with a Republican at the top of the ticket. I mean, that depending on who that was, I would likely to be part of that group that would consider voting for option C rather than A or B.
So there's been a lot of speculation about why you stepped down from No Labels as co-chair. Some have said that that means you're ruling out running. Others have said that it's a signal that you are running. So I'm going to ask you directly, what does your departure as co-chair mean for your political future?
It didn't really mean much. I was sort of surprised by all the speculation. I simply made the decision at the end of last year, which it just kind of came out. I don't know what caused the story to happen when it did. I was actually making a speech down in Florida and was surprised to hear all the hoopla. But there was stories all across the country that this must mean that I'm gearing up a campaign for president, and it did not mean that. And a couple of days later, I endorsed Nikki Haley, and then they said this must mean he's not going to do that. And the reality is that my position on No Labels hasn't changed. I'm hoping that we can get the Republican Party back on track and nominate somebody that I can strongly get behind. And I think Nikki Haley is that person for me. If No Labels runs, then I likely would, potentially not only vote for that person, but be involved in supporting that in some way. I've never started any kind of an effort to seek that nomination or to be that person. However, I didn't completely slam the door to it. I mean, people across the country are constantly encouraging me to consider it, and it's just it's too early. I think they're going to make that decision in a month or two. That when you get closer to Super Tuesday and after South Carolina, and let's figure out what happens in the primary.
So I want to be clear here: you're not closing the door on that decision, and you're open to it.
Well, the door's never been open, but I guess you'd say there's a crack in the door. It's not something I'm seeking, but if I really thought, I have no interest whatsoever in running a suicide mission or in being a spoiler or electing Donald Trump or Joe Biden. I would only run if I actually believe there's a path to victory, and at this point in time, I haven't made the decision that that's the case.
Do you have any Democrats that you would suggest be a running mate, whether it's you at the top of the ticket or not?
I mean, that's just speculation. I think there are a lot of good Democrats and Republicans who are involved in the organization, who are frustrated with their party. But I understand they're talking with a dozen or so, people about the potential. But I mean, at this point, it's sort of putting the cart before the horse.
All right. So it's been 1 year, Governor, since you've left the governor's mansion in Annapolis. And I'm just curious, now that you're 1 year out of office and everything that's happened, both across in the Middle East, geopolitically, here domestically, in the United States, the partisanship and whatnot. And I'm curious for an update on how you've spent the last year and just how you've now put it into context your time in the governor's office in Maryland.
Well, it's funny, that year went by pretty quickly, and I guess I expected to have a lot more free time. I mean, I didn't plan to retire, and I promised to continue to try to be a voice and stay involved. But I'm a little bit surprised at how busy I've been. It's been almost as my schedule's been almost as busy as it was while I was governor. Although I don't have all the real responsibilities or the power anymore, I've certainly been traveling across the country. I've been making speeches everywhere. I've done a number of fellowships and spoken out on a number of topics, and we've been, on television quite a bit and really busy from all directions. I've been trying to find a way to continue to be useful and get involved in the things I care about, and I'm continuing to try to make a difference. When I decided back in the last spring, to not seek the Republican nomination, I promised that I wasn't walking away, that I wasn't giving up, that I was going to continue to try to get the Republican Party back on track, and that I was going to continue to try to, fight for the things I believe in. And that may or may not mean ever running for office again, but I wasn't about to go retire and spend my time golfing or sitting in a rocking chair.
Well, the last couple of years of your governorship, COVID-19, reopening the state's economy, obviously trying for there to be a much more bipartisan Annapolis, which is something that even you have alluded to. No one had you winning that governor's race back when you became governor. And so what are some of the lessons that you think, and of course your time serving as the chair of the National Governors Association, what are some of the lessons that you think the governors might be able to teach Washington and Congress? Because I mean, here they just passed another short-term resolution to keep the government funded. But what are some of the lessons your governor colleagues, regardless of party, can teach Washington?
Yeah. Well, I think overall, you see governors across the country have much higher approval ratings than the people in Washington, by a factor of, 5 or 6, 7 times. And, I left off, I was in the bluest state in America. We pulled off the biggest surprise upset in the country in 2014. And I was in a difficult place with 70% majorities in both houses of far left Democrats. And we were able to get things done. We passed the first balanced budget in a decade. We eliminated the largest deficit in history and turned it into the largest surplus. And we turned our economy around, took it from 49th out of 50 states to number 6. We did it by not demonizing the other side and always trying to find, common ground and common sense and find that middle where we could kind of negotiate and compromise and actually solve problems, which I think is what most people in America, regardless of their party affiliation, really want to do. And same thing with some of my governor colleagues. I chaired the National Governors Association during COVID, where, usually we kind of talk to each other 3-4 times a year at a conference. I convened over 50 calls with all the nation's governors, 32 of them with the president and vice president. President Trump said, "Hey, that we're on our own," or governors need to make their own. We had to actually step up and lead, and I think the governors. While we didn't always agree in each and every state, but we are the ones that got us through that worst pandemic in 100 years. And so I think showing leadership, the willingness to actually govern, and, governors don't always suit up every day in red and blue uniforms to go attack the other side. They actually have to make sure things get done, and sometimes that means working across the aisle like it used to be in Washington, but no longer is.
Governor, you and I have talked about this before, but January 6th was a crucial day for you, and the role that you played in January 6th sometimes goes unnoticed. So walk me through your January 6th experience.
Well, leading up to January 6th, I was concerned that we may have some potential violence. We were hearing about things online and threats, and I called a meeting with the FBI, state police, all of our security team to try to find out what they thought, and they didn't have any specific threats. They did have concerns. They were following the traffic and seeing people talking about, what might happen. But on January 6th, I was in my office on a Zoom with the Japanese ambassador when my chief of staff came in, leaned over to me, and said the Capitol's under attack. I excused myself and got off the phone. We had calls from the mayor of D.C. reaching out, begging for us to send the National Guard. I immediately activated the Maryland National Guard. I immediately sent 250 riot-trained rapid response Maryland state troopers to the state capitol. To the U.S. Capitol. And while I was making all these decisions, I also got a call from Steny Hoyer, who called me in a panic. The majority leader, the Democratic leader. He was in a room with Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, and he was saying, "Governor, please, we need your help. We're under attack. The Capitol Police are overwhelmed and overrun. And we're, hiding, whisked away in a location or outside the door." And I assured him that we had already taken action, that the Maryland State Police were moments away, and that we had already activated the Guard, but we were waiting for approval from the Secretary of Defense. In any other place in America, I can send the National Guard with a request from the governor there, and we have done that. But in D.C., they don't have a state, and it's the only place where the Secretary of Defense has to request or approve the use of the Guard from D.C. or anywhere else. And so, we kept pushing. The people in the Capitol were reaching out, but it's crazy. The leaders of our country, the leaders of the Congress were reaching out, begging the next door governor to come protect them. We kept pushing it up the flagpole and trying to get an answer. And finally, about 2.5 hours later, after we had amassed the state, our Maryland National Guard on the border, we got the okay from Ryan McCarthy, the acting Secretary of the Army, who had only been in the post for a short period of time, to give us approval. And we were the first police to arrive outside of D.C., and we were the first National Guard to arrive outside of D.C.
It's an incredibly important.
Meanwhile, President Trump was watching TV and not taking action. And apparently when they came to him and said, you know, the vice president's in danger, and he said, so what?
It's an incredibly important recollection of your role on that crucial day, January 6th, no doubt. And just very quickly, yes, or just a couple of names. If President Biden isn't the nominee, any Democrats you'd like to see take his place? Last question for you.
Well, I'd like to see a Republican take his place, but I do think that there are any number of strong Democrats. I think Joe Biden is the weakest possible Democrat. And I think Donald Trump is the weakest possible Republican, and they're the only ones. They can only beat each other. But yeah, I think both parties ought to come up with a new generation of leaders.
All right, Governor Larry Hogan, the former governor of Maryland. Thank you, sir, for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Kevin.
And that's it for today's Newsmaker interview with America's Vote 2024. And be sure to check out the latest political and policy headlines on thehill.com.